It started off like any other night shift. The hospital was quiet, humming with the low, rhythmic beeps of heart monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses checking vitals. I've worked in healthcare for over a decade now, and nothing really surprises me anymore. At least, that's what I used to believe. The palliative care unit where I work is unique. It's both heartbreaking and oddly tranquil. People come here knowing they won't leave, and we do our best to make their final days as comfortable as possible. I currently work on a palliative care unit, a place where people come not to recover, but to be made comfortable in their final moments. It's a hard place to be, emotionally speaking, but oddly enough, it's also a peaceful place. Families gather, goodbyes are whispered, and more often than not, people pass away in their sleep. There's a calm rhythm to the end of life, until something shifts. Over the years, I've noticed things, patterns, strange consistencies that science can't quite explain. And while I'm a firm believer in medical science, even I have to admit that what I've experienced can't all be coincidence. It began with the hallucinations. That part wasn't unusual. As patients approach death, it's common for them to slip into a kind of delirium. Sometimes they'd mumble nonsense. Sometimes they'd talk to empty corners of the room. They would smile, laugh, or whisper to someone no one else could see. We chalked it up to the brain shutting down, memories blending with dreams. But then I noticed a theme. More than a few patients told me they were being visited. Not by the living, but by the dead. The details varied, but the message was always the same. They weren't alone. "My husband is waiting for me," one woman whispered as she stared at the foot of her bed. Her eyes shone with something, not fear, but wonder. Another man reached out with trembling fingers, calling out his mother's name. Others spoke of seeing children, siblings, even parents they hadn't seen in decades. These weren't terrifying apparitions. In fact, they seemed to bring peace. But then came the dog. That's what changed everything for me. Because unlike the comforting visits of deceased loved ones, the black dog brought something else entirely, a sense of dread. Patients would grow wide-eyed. They'd grab my wrist and say, "Get it out, please, get that dog out of here." The descriptions were always the same. A black German shepherd, pointed ears, calm but watchful. It never barked, never growled. It just stared. And while their loved ones brought peace, this dog brought fear. At first I assumed they were all just projecting. Maybe they had dogs as children. Maybe they were confusing past memories with present fears. Maybe it was a shared hallucination, some quirk of the dying brain. But it kept happening. Different patients, same dog. One night I stayed with a man named Joseph who was in his final hours. He'd refused to sleep, eyes darting to the corner of the room over and over. I asked what he saw. "It's sitting right there," he whispered, "by the window. It hasn't blinked once." I turned to look. Of course, there was nothing. But when I looked back, Joseph was crying. "It's here for me. I know it is." I started asking around. Other nurses. Some brushed it off. Others grew quiet. One night during shift change, a fellow nurse finally said, "You've seen the dog too, haven't you?" That's when I knew it wasn't just me. The fear in her eyes told me everything. I began doing my own research. Late-night Googling turned into poring through obscure medical journals. I searched terms like death hallucinations and end-of-life visions. Nothing. But in some old folklore archives, I found something. A figure known as the Black Dog of Death. In European legends, it's an omen, a harbinger, a spiritual guide that appears to those who are about to die. Sometimes a protector, sometimes something darker. In some tales, the dog guards the passage between worlds. In others, it hunts lost souls. Then came the night that still haunts me. It was 3:17 a.m., the thin hour nurses call it. That space between night and morning when time feels off. Everything is still, soundless. The world feels just a little closer to something unseen. A woman named Teresa had slipped into a coma earlier that day. Her family had gone home. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn. I walked in to check on her vitals, clipboard in hand, expecting another routine check. And that's when I saw it. For a split second, I swear to you, there was something at the foot of her bed. A tall, shadowy shape, low to the ground, eyes that reflected the monitor's glow. They weren't normal eyes. They had this unnatural stillness to them, as if they weren't seeing, but judging. I blinked and it was gone. No paw prints, no sound. But the temperature had dropped. My breath fogged the air. I stood frozen, every hair on my body standing upright. It felt like the silence in the room had grown heavier, more aware. Teresa passed away 10 minutes later. I didn't tell anyone that night. I wasn't ready for the questions. Or worse, the validation. The twist, 2 to 3 minutes. The next morning, I was reviewing old patient notes, those who had claimed to see the dog. I noticed something I had missed before. In each case, they described the dog not only watching them, but standing next to me. "It's next to you now," one woman had said, tears in her eyes. "You don't see it, do you?" Another had muttered, "Why does it follow you around? Why is it always beside you?" The thought chilled me. What if the dog wasn't just there for them? What if it was, attached to me? I tried to forget it, push it down. Science, I told myself. Stress, sleep deprivation. Maybe I was internalizing their fears. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Until last week. Climactic revelation and conclusion, 2 to 3 minutes. My grandmother was rushed into the ER heart attack. It was bad. For a while, we didn't know if she'd make it. I stayed with her as much as I could, barely sleeping, hoping for a miracle. She pulled through, but as she recovered, she told me something strange. "She was there again," she said, gripping my hand. My sister, standing beside a black dog. I hadn't told her anything, nothing about my work, nothing about the dog. "Your sister?" I asked. "Yes, but the dog didn't come for me. It was looking at you." I haven't been able to sleep since. Now every time I walk into a patient's room, I feel it, that presence, watching, waiting. I hear soft clicks on the linoleum, like claws. I see shadows where there should be none. So I leave you with this question. What happens when the thing that comes for the dying starts watching you? And if it's waiting, how long before it decides it's finally your turn? I've never been one to believe in the supernatural. Science, data, logic. That's how I made sense of the world, especially in my work. For 5 years, I've been a nurse. I've seen death, pain, recovery, and miracles. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I experienced 3 months ago at St. Agnes Hospital. It was the kind of job you take when you don't have better options. Old place, forgotten by most, buried in a quiet, crumbling part of the city. I needed the money, debts, bills. The night shift came with a decent paycheck, and I told myself I could manage. Just a few nights a week. That's all. I thought it would be routine. Easy. I had no idea I was walking into a nightmare. St. Agnes wasn't just old. It felt haunted. I know how that sounds. But when you walk through its endless dark hallways with flickering lights and creaking wooden panels, you start to feel like the building is watching you, breathing with you, waiting. It was originally built as a sanatorium for patients with a rare disorder called Eagle syndrome. It's not well known, and those who suffer from it live sensitive lives. They can't handle much light. So the hospital was designed to block light out almost completely. The place was a maze of shadows, hushed voices, and portraits of stern-faced founders whose eyes seemed to follow you. That first night, I tried to stay rational. Just my nerves, I told myself. But then I noticed something strange. There were no mirrors, not in the bathrooms, not in the hallways, not even in the nurse's station. I brought it up casually to another nurse. "Oh, they freak out the patients," she said too quickly. "Also, mirrors reflect light. It's better without them." It made a bit of sense, but deep down, something didn't sit right. It was too convenient, too deliberate. A whole building, a hospital no less, completely without reflective surfaces. I brushed it off, thinking I was overanalyzing, but deep inside, that was my first warning. That's when they gave me a new assignment. Room 616. A patient with no ID, no visitors, nothing to indicate who he was or where he came from. Just a thin, pale man strapped to a hospital bed, his eyes fluttering beneath paper-thin eyelids. He was pale, sunken, gaunt in ways I hadn't seen before. His skin looked almost translucent under the dim lights. He murmured constantly, never forming coherent words, just syllables, soft whispery things like ud or ood. I was checking his vitals when he suddenly grabbed my arm. Hard. His eyes locked on mine, and I swear, in that moment, I felt like he knew me. Like he was trying to tell me something. There was desperation there, but also intent. His voice became clearer, but the words remained incomprehensible. Then he lunged and bit me, hard. His teeth broke skin. I screamed and shoved him back. Blood ran down my arm. A doctor arrived moments later, looked at the man, and just sighed. "He's delirious," he said with cold indifference. "Give him a sedative." I wanted to argue. But the way the doctor looked at me, like I was the one overreacting. I injected the sedative and left the room, shaken. That night, I barely slept. My arm ached. My brain was spinning. I couldn't shake the feeling that the bite wasn't random, that it meant something. But I still went back the next night. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself it was just a patient. 3 days later, I returned to the same room. The air felt heavier, as though each breath I took carried weight. The lights seemed dimmer. The hallway seemed longer. Something in me was already on edge. The patient was motionless, more lifeless than before. He barely stirred as I entered. I held a steel tray in my hand, preparing to check his vitals again. Then I noticed something deeply disturbing. In the tray's reflection, I saw the bed, the machines, myself, but not him. His spot in the reflection was empty. I blinked, tilted the tray, moved it slightly. Nothing. His form, completely absent, like he didn't exist in the mirrored world. My heart pounded. I started sweating, tried to convince myself it was the angle, the lighting, anything rational. Then I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned quickly, breath caught in my throat. It was another nurse. She looked bored, almost annoyed. "You okay?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her if she saw what I saw. But I just nodded, pretended everything was fine. Later that night, the hospital was quieter than usual. Even the humming lights sounded distant. That's when I heard it. Whispers. Voices down the hall. I followed them carefully until I reached a dimly lit staff room. The door was cracked open. Inside were doctors, nurses, speaking in low, hushed tones. And then I heard my name. "He's marked now," someone said. "The process has begun." Another responded. The patient reacted. "It confirms it. He's the next subject." I froze. My blood turned to ice. The patient was a test, a trigger. They had planned this. Then something moved behind me, a dark, looming shadow. I turned around, but no one was there. Still, I ran. I ran blindly through the hallways. As I ran, the hospital changed. Corridors stretched impossibly long. Lights exploded above me. Doors that were once open slammed shut in my face. It was as if the building knew I was trying to escape, as if it was alive. I found a supply closet, locked myself inside. My breath was ragged, my hands trembled. Then I heard it, breathing, slow, just outside the door. "I know you're in there, sweetheart," he whispered. It was him, the patient. "You're almost ready, almost one of us." His voice was syrupy, sweet, but beneath it was malice, hunger. I could hear him dragging his nails down the door, long, slow, grating scratches. "Just open the door, it won't hurt much." I had to do something, anything. In a moment of desperation, I kicked the door open, threw a shelf of jars into him. Glass shattered across the floor. He hissed and stumbled back, retreating like an animal in pain. I ran, didn't stop, down the back hallway, out through the exit, into the freezing air. Only when I got home did I allow myself to breathe. The next morning, I quit, over the phone, no explanation. I wasn't going back, ever. But something was already happening to me. My skin getting paler, my eyes sensitive to light. I felt cold constantly. Even sunlight seemed to burn. One afternoon, I fainted after being outside for less than 20 minutes. It was only 22 degrees. At the emergency room, the attending physician looked at my chart and frowned. "You have Eagle syndrome," he said. "It's rare, but St. Agnes is the best facility for treatment." I said no. I begged him to find somewhere else. Then he smiled. Not just a normal smile, a wide one, too wide, and it lasted a little too long. I left. I haven't gone back. But I know they're watching me. If you ever walk into a hospital and notice there are no mirrors, get out. Don't ask questions. Don't look back. Just run. Because some places aren't hospitals. They're harvesters,